our mantra is do no harm. And that's what we're trying to do, and I feel like we've adhered to that. We've tried to do the best we can as far as what we've done and how we've changed it. You know, in the very beginning, I had some early producers that were around. You know, we'd heard how we had ruined this ranch all the way to New Mexico, and several years later, I had some people tell me, they said, we don't know what you're doing, but we've never seen that much grass on that ranch. And it's not something, we're not doing anything better than anybody else. Don't get me wrong. We're just doing something different than what had been done on here before. And I feel like it's, the proof is in the pudding, as they say. It was a big decision that we had to make. You know, we had to pray about it when we come up here and we looked at this. And when I seen this place, I thought, I want my son to grow up on this place. And that was part of the reason that I looked at this opportunity and took this job. But we, you know, my wife and I, we had to pray about this because, you know, I was leaving a career position in a settled area in a part of the world that we really like. Come up here to a country we didn't know anything about and people we didn't know. I do not regret the decision one bit. The people that we work for, Rex and Susan McCloys, some of the most humble, generous people I've ever met. They allow us to use this ranch as a teaching facility and allow people to come in and see the ranch. And you know, we're truly grateful for that. That is something that, you know, you couldn't ask for anything better, couldn't ask for better employers. And very fortunate to be here. My name's Mike Turner. I am the manager for the Blue Ranch division of McLeod Farms. We've been with the company now for almost 11 years and came on board in 2015. I went to work for the owners, Rex and Susan McCloys, who own the Blue Ranch, and they implemented a high-intensity, low-frequency grazing operation on an old historic ranch here in Moore County in Dumas, Texas, and have watched this ranch change exponentially over the years through our grazing management and the biodiversity that we've helped facilitate the growth with over the years. We've seen things change from a short midgrass prairie to a tall grass prairie, and we've seen that happen within 10 years. And that's one of the things that we're most proud of. We've won multiple awards over the years for our rangeland stewardship and environmental stewardship, and those are some of the things that we're really proud of. One of the things that the owners had tasked me with was to do no harm. We want to make this place better than what we found it, and we feel like that we've been able to accomplish that task.
I'm really excited about this episode because this is my part of the country. We are not in an area where there's a lot of trees, a lot of humidity, and we're dealing with a different type of rainfall. So let's talk about what you've got going on with the rangeland. What kind of native grasses are we looking at, and how this land, how you manage it, and then just for those who aren't super familiar with the Panhandle.
Okay, well, thank you, and that's a good question. So what we're trying to do with the amount of forage that we produce, we're trying to mimic. A lot of times you hear this that we're trying to mimic what the buffalo did. Okay, so what we're trying to do is we run a high intensity, low frequency grazing operation. And what that means is we will run a large herd unit in a small paddock for a short duration of time. The biggest thing that they don't always tell you about when the bison left an area, it was basically denuded of vegetation. That's why the migratory period lasted anywhere from 2 to 4 years before they could make it back to an area, because they gave that time for ample rest and rainfall to be able to grow forage and biomass back. So literally when bison left, there was very little vegetation left. They came about, and their migratory pattern all went from, middle central Texas all the way up to the Canadian border and back down again. So they had a pretty big swath that they could go through. Our goal right now is we're just trying to take off the top third of the plant. And when we do that, we try to come through here, graze that, and it could be on a 3 to 5 day rotation in here. And what I'm trying to do is just take that top third of the plant off of there. The plant will get stimulated through the grazing portion of it. Biomass will respond to pressure, whether it's biological or mechanical. So if I run a shredder across this or I run a cow across this, that plant will respond to that. And what we're trying to do is not get it taken down or grazed off past the growing points on that plant. So what we try to do is graze that. And so one of the things that we noticed within our grazing program is, when I initially came on, I talked to the owners and I thought, it's going to be at least a minimum of 4 to 5 years before we see any real changes in the species dynamics. And so about year 3, we started seeing a lot of our tall prairie grasses come back in. And by year 5, we started seeing exponential growth. One thing I always tell people is it's not how much I harvest, it's what I leave behind. And if we leave enough biomass behind, we're allowing that plant to be able to capture all the moisture that's available to it. And all the forage that you're seeing right now, we've grown this on 15 inches of rain this year in 25.
What is your average rainfall?
19 to 21.
Man.
My best rainfall year was the year I moved up here, was 32 inches. And I thought, wow, we'll never see a bad day. And but we've been through
it.
Yeah, exactly. So we've been through multiple droughts. One thing that we've been very fortunate with our grazing program, we've always had a lot of feed in the bank, as they say, and so we're able to keep a lot of biomass. And even in 17, 18, and 19 were pretty bad drought years. We had 14 inches of rain for those calendar years. And that's what they averaged almost for a 3-year period of time. And we were able to rotate through here and utilize all of the forage that we've got. Now, we're kind of unique in our situation that at our farm operation, I'm only a phone call away to move cattle to the next location to the farm operation. But the point I was making, we've never had to sell a cow due to drought conditions. And that's one thing that we're really proud of.
It's impressive.
Just for the fact
especially the last couple of years, or I guess what would have been, 19, 20, yep. 21 area,
yep.
Especially.
Those years were, there was definitely a deficit from a rainfall standpoint. And we got short. We got down to 1,200-1,400 pounds of biomass in a lot of these grazing cells.
Can you explain what you mean by biomass?
Okay, so biomass is going to be the forage or the vegetation that covers the top of the soil, and it's not a monoculture of any one type of species. But I look at biomass as going to be the conglomerate of all the things that are there. And so what we have here is we have a really good presentation. We've got a lot of variation in the species we've got here.
And this is just like a picture perfect right here.
As you can see this area right here, so you've got Indian grass, big bluestem, tall drop seed. We've got the stuff that's a little lower down here. We've got side oats gama in here. We've got some variations in some broadleafs in here. And so that's the thing that you really want for a healthy ecosystem. It's not a monoculture. It's going to be a variety of different plants in there. So we've actually got, we've got a lot of perennial plants in here, but we'll, in the spring, late fall and early spring, in these low-lying areas, we'll have western wheatgrass, which is going to be a cool season perennial. And we've got some of that in those low-lying areas. We've got vine mesquite, a lot of low-lying areas that might hold water. Vine mesquite down here, it creates a really good thatch, and it's a good area. And it also I look at it as indicator species. And when I start seeing like my vine mesquite, my Indian grass that we've got over here. As we were coming across the Blue Creek, I was showing y'all the switchgrass. So to me, those are indicator species. That tells me that my rangeland is trending upward. And so those are the things that I look for. I'm a grass nerd. I love grass, and my son's probably going to be a better grass nerd than I am. But this is what gets me excited.
Yeah.
This is what I love about what we do, because we get the opportunity to see this. And I've watched this ranch change in the almost 11 years that I've been here. With the amount of tall grass species coming back in. And that's one of the things that we're most proud of. The owners, Rex and Susan McCloy, their charge to me was leave it better than what you found it. And our mantra is do no harm. And that's what we're trying to do. And I feel like we've adhered to that. We've tried to do the best we can as far as what we've done and how we've changed it. In the very beginning, I had some early producers that were around. We'd heard how we had ruined this ranch all the way to New Mexico, but anyhow, several years later, I had some people tell me, said, "We don't know what you're doing, but we've never seen that much grass on that ranch." And it's not something, we're not doing anything better than anybody else. Don't get me wrong. We're just doing something different than what had been done on here before. And I feel like it's the proof is in the pudding, as they say. So as we're looking, you're seeing right here, so this is going to be little bluestem right here. Okay, this is going to be a new colony of little bluestem as it's coming in, and you'll see a colony right there. And as it expands, it'll start growing out larger and larger.
So is it kind of like a bunch? Would
you
categorize it
all
bunch grass?
These grasses are going to be a sod forming bunch grass.
Okay.
Okay. So what you're seeing here now, this is side oats gama here. Same thing, and there's several varieties of side oats, and I don't always know which ones they are. I just know that they're side oats. But the other side of that is that you'll start seeing they're starting to fill in some of these interspersed places that 5 years ago this might have been some bare ground through here. Yeah. And so what you're seeing now, this is the dead litter cover that we're seeing here. This down here on the bottom, this is actually this plant started to desiccate. And start to die out a little bit, but you've got new growth coming back in here in the middle. But as you can see, this is starting to fill in. This area several years ago did not have little bluestem in it. So this is something that's coming in, and again, through the grazing program, with us rotating cattle fairly quickly through there, those cattle are disseminating the seed that they pick up. It's either going to be in their hair coat or what they eat, and they pass through defecation. But a lot of times, and that's how the buffalo, the buffalo they actually had wool instead of hair. And so they picked up a lot of the seed, and that's why a lot of the grass species that we have, we find them throughout the continental United States, because the buffalo brought them with them. And so that's what we're doing. That's how we're seeing some of this come back in here. And the seed bank was there. We just needed it needed the right conditions to express itself. And through, my motto is graze, rest, repeat. And that's what we've done. And we've done for almost 11 years now that I've been with the organization. So when Rex and them, they first bought the ranch, a lot of the old fences had been bulldozed out. And so we had several pastures on this ranch. We had about 3 pastures when they first bought the ranch. About an 8,000 acre pasture, a 9,000 acre pasture, and about a 2,000 acre trap in the middle of it. And anyhow, they started looking at different ways to fence this, and one of the ways that they looked at was using electrical wire and high tensile fence. And so that was what they started to put into place and implement. And they started doing their water infrastructure first, and then started building their fences from that. And from there, they started stocking this ranch. And they started putting cows on here, I think, in the spring of 14. I came on board in the late spring of 15. I believe it was May of 15 when I came on board. We had a manager on our New Mexico division and his name was Roy Mitchell, and he was the one that was really implemented the grazing system and the infrastructure on this ranch over here. His ranch in New Mexico, we had destocked that when he came over here when they started building this ranch, and Roy was very instrumental in putting this all together. And but he had the opportunity to stay here, go back to New Mexico, and he wanted to go back to New Mexico. So we were fortunate that we got the opportunity to come up here and work on the foundation that he had laid, and very appreciative of that. But we had the opportunity to see the cows, and one of the first things that I did was we had multiple herds on here when I first got here, and I put all the herds into one herd unit, and the thought process behind that was more animal units on a smaller area would mean more maximize our animal impact on the ground and maximize our forage harvesting capabilities on there. And so that way our animals weren't necessarily cherry picking everything that was there. They had to take a little bit of everything, you know, and we're taught that animals will only eat certain species, and certain species they've got to stay away from. Mother Nature will show you otherwise. Mother Nature will show you, hey, this animal needs something. I need to go take a bite of that. You know, we've got loco weed. Loco weed is toxic, you know, to animals, but in large volumes or large quantities, that's when it's detrimental to an animal or toxic. You know, Mother Nature might tell you, hey, there's something in that plant you need, go take a bite of it. Woolly croton, you know, silverleaf nightshades, another one, can be very toxic to animals. Usually it's naive animals that have never been around it, and they're in a stressful condition. But you know, they'll go and eat and forage off of that. Blue sand sage, there's another one. You know, they will tell you they're not supposed to eat that. Well, in the wintertime, if you got a foot of snow on the ground, that's the only thing up above the snow line, those cattle will eat that. It's dry matter, and it's filler, but it'll keep their gut active. And so one of the things that we try to do is we try to make sure that they're taking a bite of everything that they come to. And they may only take a little bit of it, but they're going to take a bite of it.
So you have a lot of knowledge about the USDA and NRCS. Do you use, and have you used, any kind of programs to help implement and get this ranch to where it is today?
Emma, that's a good question, and yes to that question. Being a former USDA employee, I was well aware of the programs that are available out there, and also the technical assistance that USDA offers. But one of the things as a producer and as a landowner that we're able to take advantage of is the EQIP program and the CSP program. So the EQIP is going to be Environmental Quality Incentive Program. The CSP is going to be the Conservation Stewardship Program. We're actually in our second contract on this ranch, and I have signed us up for a third contract on a different ranch that I was able to lease last year, and that we've been in operation with that ranch now for a little over a year. And so it was eligible this year for CSP funding and for the Conservation Stewardship Program as well.
What is that program? Can you walk me through with what that entails?
So what that does, the Conservation Stewardship Program, it rewards producers for implementing conservation practices in their program. And you know, it can be small things like retrofitting waters to put wildlife escapes in there, or it could be putting wildlife friendly fence in there, you know, or having areas designated for riparian areas. These are some of the enhancements that you can do on there, and one of the systems that we also use is the nutritional balance analysis program, the nutball program. So I have to do fecal samples to come in, and we do this about every other year. I'll pull fecals on the cows, and it'll tell me what my crude protein is of my forage base is at. Also, you know, I go a step further, and then I'll do what my parasite load is. One of the things that we've really noticed with our grazing program, I haven't wormed a cow in probably 7 years.
7?
Yeah. So we don't complete the life cycle of the parasite that would be out there on the ground. And we also don't graze the forage base down to where it's short enough to be close to the ground. But that was one of the things that one of the big significant changes that we noticed when we do a fecal sample, and when I check for parasite load, it's usually 0 or 1%. So
Wow.
of negligible value is what it basically says. So.
And so when you're talking about the cattle, switch gears a little bit, talk about some of the genetics. Everything I saw out today was black-hided.
Yep.
So are you retaining bulls, breeding your own? What is your cattle operation out here?
So we're a commercial cow-calf operation. We're probably as closely managed of being a seed stock operation as you can get, but we're still a commercial cow operation. For many years, we DNA tested all of our females going into the program, and our parameters we're looking for meat and yield quality. Those are things that we stress, and the other thing is I've got to have maternal instinct back in these cows as well. But our target parameter, we're vertically integrated, so we go from the cow-calf phase to the feeder phase to the feedlot phase to the kill floor, and from pasture to plate, we monitor these cattle. And the genetics that we use, we have worked with the Gardner operation. My boss and Mark Gardner are personal friends, and they've collaborated on a lot of stuff over the years. So we've been associated with Gardners for a better part of 25 years, I think. That's correct. And anyhow, we've got Angus-based cow herd. We use Gardner bulls as bulls that we replace, and then we also raise a lot of our own replacement bulls. We'll use upwards of 35 to 50 bulls a year, depending on our cow numbers. And so we try to cheapen our bull battery up as much as we can. We'll keep bull calves out of our first calf heifers, everything that would have been AI bred, and I'll pull DNA on them and find out who their sire and dam is. Then also, where their markers are at for the meat cutability, and also calving ease disposition. That's one of the things that I stress highly. But also some maternal. We need to have some maternal and some milk back in these cows. But the biggest thing is everything that we raise is going to go to the harvesting plant. So they're going to go to the packing plant, and we eat what we raise as well. So that's one of the things that we're very stringent on. We want to make sure that we've got a good, healthy product that we're putting out there, because my family's eating it just like you. And these are the things that we really stress highly upon. But the cows that we've got, they work in our area. Not all cattle work up here, and the cattle that we've got, they survive and thrive in the area that they're in. And you cannot create an environment for your cow. You have to have a cow for your environment. And this particular Angus herd works really well in the region that we're in, with the amount of forage that we produce and the rainfall that we have.
I love how you said that, because I think one of the questions that producers and even people in academia get all the time is, oh, what breed is best? Well, depends on your environment, depends what your operation goals are.
Yep.
And speaking of operation goals, so you're watching these animals go through, this might be an unfair question, but because genomics are consistently increasing and improving, but have you noticed, since the change of management on the forage side with the cattle, have you seen any type of difference in the carcass data as well? Or is that too much of a mix of both genetics and environment to really make that call?
What I am seeing is we don't wean the heaviest calf in the world, and it was never my goal. The owners even said, we're not trying to win the coffee shop contest of I wean 700-pound calves this year. My goal is, I produce widgets, but I've got to produce a healthy, viable product to go to the next level in the production chain. And so my goal is to produce a healthy calf that will do well and thrive in the next phase of its environment, which will be the feeding phase. And that's one thing that we've noticed. Our health has gone up, and once we get them past the backgrounding phase here, they usually do very well in the feeding side. And of course, we own these cattle all the way through harvest. And so we know what our genetics are going to do, but we also know that they're going to yield and grade. And that's the biggest thing is, we've gone from a lot of cattle that were mid-choice to we consistently have more cattle grading prime than we do in lower choice ranges. So that's one of the things that was one of our target parameters. So we're able to garner a lot of the premiums that are available in the market system right now. There's CAB premiums, there's prime premiums, there's upper choice premiums, and we're able to garner those premiums. And a lot of times, and we're still getting paid for pounds across the scale. And so, we're still producing a heavyweight carcass, but it also has grading ability to be in those premium categories.
That's awesome.
So,
and when you came into this operation, you've made a lot of changes in terms of infrastructure, and we talked about fencing, but also the water side of things.
mm-hmm.
When you're changing up the way that you're grazing, like you said earlier, you have to have water available. So can you walk me through some of the changes that you've made? I've heard that you've laid down a lot of pipeline in order to make this work. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so some of the last water system that's put in, I've helped put in that infrastructure. A lot of that was laid in here before I got here. But the McCloys understood that water is always your biggest Achilles heel. And for any ranching operation that you go to, water is always going to be your biggest delineating factor. And one of the things that they saw early on was that they needed water points, and they needed it distributed throughout the ranch. And the way that we're set up now, so we went from, historically this ranch was serviced by about 12 windmills. Now I have 36 water points on the ranch. And each one of those water points are going to be a mile or less from each location, because that's generally the amount of area that a cow will cover, and before she starts losing weight and losing body condition. So we try to keep them as close as possible. And most of our paddocks are serviced by 1 to, some of them have 3 water points in them. But the biggest takeaway is that nothing has to walk more than a mile to get to it. And the other side of that too is our water system is set up in such a way, historically a windmill will service 1 to 3 gallons a minute. The way we're set up is we've got a exterior holding tank above ground, holds 62,000 gallons of water. We've got a lift pump that will push water to the troughs, and I can service those troughs at 17 to 20 gallons a minute. So that's why we're able to water large volumes of cattle in a one herd unit with that water system that we put in. And that was something that the owner's son developed, and we built all this in-house. And we've had this thing in place now for 13 years, and it's performed flawlessly. It's been a game changer for me.
It sounds like it.
But we are very appreciative of that, and just the ability of getting water to the locations that the cattle are at. That was one of the big deciding factors that the owners put a lot of thought into that, of doing that. And I don't think I could have changed anything or made it any different, because it's really good the way it was. So.
And there you have it, proof that you can incorporate better grazing techniques to improve your herd and the land no matter where you live. We want to thank Mike Turner and the owners of the Blue Ranch, Rex and Susan McCloy, for having us out today. This episode of Ranch Worthy is brought to you by the Texas A&M Center for Grazing Lands and Ranch Management. Until next time, I'm your host, Emma Coffman, and this is Ranch Worthy.